Kelsey with White Cottage Boutique, here today with a tutorial on how to paint furniture with a brush. Today we're going to be painting this drawer off of a dresser that I am currently refinishing. I'm going to show you some tips and some techniques and products that you can use to get a super smooth finish without brush strokes, which I think is something everybody is wanting to know how to do. So the biggest thing to getting a great finish is the products that you use. The first thing, we're going to use 3 simple products today. The first thing is going to be your brush. I prefer this brush. It's by Benjamin Moore. It's product number 65125. It's a nylon polyester blend. It's 2.5 inch angled brush. You can really use any high quality brush. It doesn't make, it's kind of a personal preference. I just love this brush, and it's only about $50 on Amazon, so it's really not a super expensive brush. And if you take care of it, it will last you years and years and years and years. So the first is your brush. The second is the type of paint that you use. So I use, when I'm hand painting furniture, I use Sherwin-Williams Cashmere. This paint does the best job of leveling off out of any paint that I've used. So I use it anytime I'm going to be painting furniture by hand. Today we're going to be using a color called Caliente by Benjamin Moore. It's a beautiful bright red color that we've just had cashmere tinted to. And then the next is using Blue Minerals. I use Blue Minerals Chocolate Mineral Paint Powder on every piece of furniture that I use, because one, it eliminates the need for primers, which is a big deal when you're hand painting, especially because primers tend to leave a lot of brush strokes behind or brush marks behind. So getting rid of that will help you get a smoother finish, as well as it just saves you tons and tons of time and creates a really satiny finish, which I love. So I've already got a little less than a quart of Blue Minerals paint mixed up with the Blue Minerals mixed up with the cashmere paint. And then also the last thing you want to do with it when you're mixing it up, and there's a tutorial on our site about how to mix up Blue Minerals, you want to add about 1/4 cup per quart of the cashmere paint in water. So you're just going to dilute it down slightly. It helps get a little bit of a smoother finish. You do usually have to do an extra coat. So with whites, usually I'll do between 2 to 3 coats if it's not diluted. When I dilute it down, I usually need between 3 and 4. Same with reds, tend to need a little bit more coats than, say, like a dark blue or a black. So I've diluted this down with 1/4 cup of water. And the other thing, with the reason I use water instead of a conditioner like Floetrol actually doesn't work too well with cashmere from what I've found. I've tried it multiple times. I know there are people that swear by Floetrol, but I just don't see it. I feel like it actually slows the workable time, especially with the cashmere paint. And part of what I love about cashmere is that you can work with it for so long, compared to other brands, that when you put the Floetrol in it, it kind of makes it just like all the other brands. So I actually prefer water over those, and it's less expensive. So we're gonna start painting. Here's what I'm going to do. Let's see. So when you go to paint your furniture, or when you're brushing, part of keeping your brush nice is how you apply the paint. You don't want to be, jabbing your brush. You want to try to keep all the bristles going in the same direction all the time, and you don't want your paint to get all the way up to the tip here. It's my little cat. It's being an idiot. You want the paint to be about I'd say 1/4 to 1/8 inch up the brush. So you can kind of see this. I'm not getting a ton of paint on, and so I just dip it in and I kind of wipe off the excess, because you don't want a ton of paint on there either, or you'll just end up getting drips. Then you're just going to start painting it on. And with this, I don't find that I have to paint it in any specific way to get a good finish. You just want to make sure your whatever you're painting is really clean. That helps. And I just kind of put it on in whatever way, trying to make sure that there are not any areas that have globs, because the globs will be visible when it dries. So you just want to smooth it out, and be careful not to overwork work it, but that's one of the great things about this paint is since the workability time or the workable time is so long, you can really just kind of work with it for a while, not end up hurting it. If you work with it too long, it'll start to get tacky, and then you'll actually start to kind of create a mess for yourself. So there's definitely, it's kind of a trial and error. You'll get kind of used to it after a while, but this is really the easiest paint I've ever used to put on, especially when you dilute it down with the water that I just told you about. The only thing with this paint that was a little bit of a shocker for me when I first started using it is it almost looks transparent, especially on the first coat. I was a little bit, when I first did it, I kind of was freaking out because I thought that I was gonna have to do just so many coats to get it to look solid. But what I ended up finding out is that it's really only about one more coat than you would have to do with another piece. And if I don't dilute it down, it's the same as other paints, but the diluting actually saves you time in the end because you don't have to sand in between coats to knock down those brush strokes. So it's kind of, I think, a lot easier in the end. Okay, so you can see how transparent this looks. It just looks like there's hardly anything on it, and as it dries it'll look even more transparent. It's really weird. The first coat just is really strange, especially with the red. I don't notice it as much on different colors, but with this Caliente color it's very, very weird. So you just kind of, you don't want to touch it after it's set unless you see something that you know is going to be a problem. Then you can just really lightly kind of flatten it out. But it does a good job of flattening out. So even if you feel like there's some brush strokes in it at this stage, a lot of those will disappear, or the majority of those will disappear as it dries. Then usually in between coats I'll kind of go through and just make sure there's not anything that's really bad that jumps out at me. But it really, for the most part, on most pieces in most situations, you don't have to do anything. You can just put on your paint, no sanding in between coats or anything, and it will look just gorgeous when it comes out. So I'm gonna let this dry for about an hour. Okay, so I'm back. You can see that it's been about an hour since I finished painting this, and you can see that I went around and just painted all the rest of the drawers that go with the dresser. While I was waiting for this one to dry, I actually didn't do a very good job of cleaning this before I started painting, so there was like this weird stuff right here that I missed, and so I actually ended up sanding it down and cleaning it off right here. So that's why it looks like there's no paint there. But you can see on the rest of it how transparent it looks. I mean, it really doesn't look like there's much paint on it at all. Like, it has a red tint, but you can see like all of the grain marks and like texture that was done in the wood through it. So we're gonna put another coat on. You can see how much of a difference it makes when you go into the second coat. Also, there are no brush strokes in this at all. All of the texture that's in it is from the texture that was in the wood before. And so it goes on really, really smooth, especially the first coat. Now, as you start to put on the next couple coats, you want to start being a little bit more careful about how you put it on if you really want to avoid sanding. You want to make sure you're not overworking it, but the biggest thing that I do, and the biggest tip that I have for you to avoid brush strokes, is I'll brush it on, just kind of whatever way, it doesn't matter, just to make sure the whole thing is covered, like I'm doing for this little section right here. And then I'll go back over it and tip it off, which means that I'll go over it barely pushing down at a slight angle and just kind of run all the way across, picking up any excess paint and just kind of smoothing it out. And you want to be very careful about this, because if it's too dry, if you wait too long to go through this, you'll actually end up causing more problems. So you want to make sure that you're working in smaller sections so that you have enough time to run over it real quick to make sure that it's all smoothed down without it drying. You also want to make sure you're maintaining the wet edge as you paint, which means that the areas that you're working over are still dry. So you want to work strategically from one end to the other and not kind of jump back and forth. You can see how quickly this dries. It's already, you can see the color changing right here, so you can tell it's starting to dry. If I were to try to paint over that right now, it would actually cause a huge mess. So once you start to see that, you want to really avoid those areas because they're really tacky. So when you put your brush in it, it actually just kind of pulls the paint up, and it's just becomes a gigantic mess that you have to sand down later. So I'm being very careful not to go over those areas that look somewhat dry as I'm painting. the second coat, I know there's a few areas that aren't quite covered, but those are areas that are so close to those dry areas I was talking about a second ago that I'm actually gonna wait until it dries to go through those instead of trying to make sure I get those in this coat. You can see how much of a difference it makes between this one that just has one coat and this one, how much more solid the color looks. And so we're gonna do the same thing as last time, just wait about an hour until it's dry and then go back over it. Okay, so I'm back here to do the third coat of paint on this drawer. You can see how much more solid it looks as this coat dried. I'm probably only going to do one more coat, maybe a little bit of a third coat in some areas that just seem like they're not as solid as the others, but for right now we're just going to start on the third coat. As I was working with this, because I've been putting on these coats on the rest of the dresser as well as the other drawers, the paint started to get a little bit thicker and more difficult to work with, so I just added a little bit more water. So feel free to, add more water as you're working if you start to feel like the paint is just too thick and it's just kind of caking up. Because as it sits out and you're working with it, it does thicken up. So you want to keep it a really pretty thin consistency for this. So I just add little bits of water until I get kind of the consistency that I want. And I'm actually feeling like this is just a touch too thick even now. So I'm going to add a little bit of water real quick, just a tiny bit. I just added what I would say, is about a tablespoon of water for what's left of my paint, which is maybe half a quart. And I'm going to just put this on, and it's a lot easier to work with now. So it's not drying up as so fast that I can't work with it. So you do want to be careful when you're thinning out your paint, not to get it so thin that you start to get drips. It's not as big of a concern on a surface like this that's pretty much just flat as it is when you're working on like the sides of a dresser or something like that, because it can, if it drips, then you end up just having to sand it off, which ruins the whole point of doing it anyways. So you kind of need to find a good medium for what you're working with. You also don't want to have to do too many coats, because the more water you add, the less solid that coat of paint is going to be. So you don't want to do it so thin that it's like a wash and it just never ever gets, or you have to do 20 coats of paint to even get a color on there. I'm just going to quickly check and make sure, because this is the last coat, I want to make sure everything is covered well. also kind of making sure that there's not any drips or clumps, just like in the last coats. That looks pretty good to me. I know it looks a little messy because it's kind of half drying. But I'm going to let this dry all the way, just like we did before on the other coats. And then what I'll do, what I like to do is just kind of, because this is probably going to be the last coat, it might need another one. But I'll just come back and check and see if it needs another coat. If not, then I will let it dry for a good couple of hours, like maybe 5 hours, and then I'll come back and wax it. Sometimes I'll just let it dry overnight depending on what I'm doing. But you could, if you started early, you could really get a piece of furniture hand painted within a day, depending on how big it is and how fast you work. But yeah, so I'll be back in just a little bit. Okay, I'm back. So our third coat is now dry, and I've just been looking at it, trying to decide if it needed a third coat or a fourth coat. And I think I'm going to put one on just because there's a few spots that just don't seem quite solid to me. And so I'm going to quickly do that, and then I'll show you the finished piece. I don't think you can see I think it looks pretty solid in the camera, but like right here, there's an area that looks pretty, that you kind of can see through. So I'm just gonna do one more coat just to top it off and make sure that it is 100% solid. Let's see. Okay, so I'm really happy with this. I think that this will probably be the last coat. I don't see anything that makes me feel like I would need another coat, but I will show you the finished piece so you can see how well it looks, how well it smooths out as you apply it. So, all right. So we are all done with painting the dresser drawer. I think we put on a total of 4 coats. The fourth coat was just a really quick kind of go over all the areas that seemed like they weren't quite covered. This is what it looks like. I'm going to zoom up for you so you can hopefully see how smooth the finish turns out. I didn't do any sanding or anything on this piece. The only real texture you can see is from the actual, what is it called? The grain in the actual finish or the wood. Other than that, it really looks really smooth and clean. So yeah, hopefully if you struggled before in the past with getting a good finish with just a brush and you don't have the ability to get a sprayer, this is a really good alternative. So I hope that you enjoyed, and we'll hopefully have some new tutorials for you guys soon.